This video is for educational and infotainment purposes only. It is not intended to encourage or glorify the use of illegal drugs in any way. Well, we knew it was going to happen sooner or later. Some new drug was going to come along and expand or move beyond the world of fentanyl. So welcome to the world of Xylazine or Tranq. And people ask, why would you need something more powerful than a drug that can kill you with a teeny tiny amount? Well, Xylazine is not a more powerful drug, but instead it is a drug that gives fentanyl and heroin and other opioids. It gives it legs, as they say, or it prolongs the effects of the high. So what is it and how is it being abused? Well, you're about to find out. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we are going to take a look at the use and abuse of Xylazine, also known as Tranq or the zombie drug because of what it does to its users. We're also going to talk about opioids in general, including heroin and fentanyl, because you really have to understand how those drugs interact with the human body to appreciate in full how Tranq contributes to the abuse of opioids. We'll talk about how its use has skyrocketed, and we'll also distinguish it from ketamine, a substance that it is sometimes mistaken as, all in today's episode. If you enjoy the episode, hit that like button for me. If you got something to say, you have a comment, put it in the comment sections below. And if you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button now. Now, most people think that Tranq is just another step in the evolution of drugs from within the opioid family. Opioids being named after opium, from which they are sourced. Well, Tranq is not an opioid. It's a sedative. It's a large animal or a horse tranquilizer, and that's where it gets its nickname, Tranq, short for tranquilizer. But even though it's not an opioid, it is often mixed with heroin or fentanyl, so a little history of opioids is in order. So you start with opium, which is the psychoactive substance that is obtained from the opium poppy plant. Of note is that opium is considered the most addictive of all the naturally occurring alkaloids. It is obtained by scoring or cutting the poppy seed pod, after which a white milky substance referred to as poppy tears or the milk of the poppy, and technically called latex, is excreted and allowed to dry into a sticky yellowish sap. This opium sap or gum contains 3 psychoactive substances: codeine, morphine, and thebaine. Now, most people are familiar with codeine and morphine. Codeine is used medicinally primarily as a potent cough suppressant and also an antidiarrheal. Morphine is used medicinally as a sedative and for the treatment of acute pain after injury or surgery. Morphine is also what is processed further to create heroin, which is at least twice as potent. And of course, heroin is used predominantly in the illegal drug trade. Then there is thebaine, which is the raw material that is processed to make prescription opioid pain pills such as hydrocodone or Vicodin or Oxycontin. Interestingly, 99% of the global sales of hydrocodone are to one country, the United States. So it's no wonder we have an opioid epidemic in this country. Anyway, these 3 substances were first isolated in the 1800s. In 1897, Bayer Pharmaceuticals, yes, the aspirin company, pitched heroin to the German government as a non-addictive children's cough medicine. Yeah, and they got it approved. So from 1900 to 1920, heroin was marketed and sold as a non-addictive cough suppressant and a painkiller. And it took a while, but everybody figured out, hey, wait a minute, heroin is actually really, really addictive. And ultimately, it was declared illegal by most countries by 1930. But by then, the cat was out of the bag, and the recreational use of heroin began throughout the entire world. Now, in my full-length video on the history of heroin, we talk about how it's used. We talk about the types, white, brown, black tar, and the hybrids, and how each one is made. We also talk about where most of the world's heroin comes from: Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Mexico. All of that is beyond the scope of this video, but if you are interested in a deeper dive into opium as a whole, you can check out my full-length video on opium. I have a separate video on heroin and a third video specifically dedicated to fentanyl. Recreational drug users have mixed heroin with other substances since day one, with probably the most famous concoction being the speedball, a mixture of heroin and cocaine. It's a deadly combo, and we lost John Belushi, Chris Farley, River Phoenix, Lane Staley, Mitch Hedberg, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, all to speedball overdoses. And the most recent craze is to mix heroin with fentanyl. And that's bad, because fentanyl is so freaking strong. To give you a rough opioid comparison, morphine is twice as potent as codeine. Heroin is twice as potent as morphine. And fentanyl, well, it's 50 times as potent as the same quantity of heroin. The stuff is super powerful. A tiny quantity that gets one person high can kill another person, which is why fentanyl is by far and away the world's leader in overdose deaths. Now, fentanyl, or fentanyl as the media likes to refer to it, was first synthesized from opium by Paul Janssen and Janssen Pharmaceuticals back in 1960. It was approved for medical use in the United States in 1968, and it was billed as a better pain management drug than morphine. In 1990, the transdermal fentanyl patch that you place on your body for a measured, slow release of the drug was introduced and widely prescribed. The patch itself contains a dosage that would be fatal if taken all at once, but it's absorbed gradually through the skin at therapeutic levels. Now, once people appreciated the full potency of these patches, they started extracting and abusing the drug through a procedure generally called diversion. And people liked it. And so once there was a demand for fentanyl, there of course became an illegal supply. Funny how that works. Today, you can buy fentanyl in large quantities from China or Mexico or on the streets. Which all begs the question, why do people love this stuff so much, and why are opioids so addictive? Well, we'll answer that question in just a second. But first, we have a shout out to our premier sponsor. If you are not familiar with virtual private networks, then today is your lucky day, because without one, you are exposed. Your internet activities are viewable by retailers, solicitors, and the more nefarious, hackers. Even worse, your computer's IP address tells the world exactly where you are. But with ExpressVPN, you create a secure and private connection to the internet. No more worrying about hackers, no more worrying about connecting to public Wi-Fi. And your computer's true IP address, it's totally masked. And beyond security, ExpressVPN allows for expanded streaming content and gaming lobbies. And here's how. Most streaming services use geo-blocking to restrict internet content in your geographic region. However, with over 3,000 servers in 94 countries, you simply change your VPN country location and you sidestep the geo-blocking restrictions in your area. Example, you like Japanese anime, but you can't get it on Netflix in the United States. However, with ExpressVPN, you simply set your location to the server in Tokyo and your streaming options totally change. It's really cool. ExpressVPN. It's the biggest, it's the best, and it's the fastest in the business. And you can give it a try risk-free for 3 months simply by signing up through the link in the description below. So we're back. And the question was, why are opioids so addictive? Well, humans have opioid receptors in the brain, which give off a euphoric feeling when they are stimulated. And the human body naturally produces endorphins which stimulate these receptors. However, when you ingest external opioids, the body slows its natural production of endorphins. And that is the first problem. The second problem is that the human body builds up a tolerance for opioids really quickly. So you have to take a little bit more every time to overcome your tolerance levels if you want to feel those euphoric effects. And as you take more and more, the body naturally produces less and less. And as the body gets used to having opioids in it, it starts to react negatively when it doesn't have the opium. A problem that is compounded because, remember, the body isn't producing normal levels of endorphins anymore. So what you are left with are the terrible effects of opium withdrawal: nausea and vomiting, intense body aches, involuntary muscle spasms. In fact, kicking the habit, that phrase comes from people withdrawing and the involuntary leg spasms that they have in connection with trying to come off of heroin. Clients of mine that have been addicted describe it as having the flu times 10. And you get to the point where you need to get your opium fix or you're going to be really sick. But with each fix, you raise your tolerance levels. You decrease your natural endorphins and you flame the symptoms of withdrawal. It's a vicious cycle and it's the stuff of addiction. So at some point, if you don't die first, you either quit using, you break the cycle, often by medical intervention through methadone or Suboxone, or you up the game, you up the potency, and you graduate to mixtures containing fentanyl. And eventually, over time, again, if you don't die first, even fentanyl is not enough. So what do you do then? Well, hello, Xylazine. The newest drug craze spreading rapidly in popularity across the United States is Xylazine, also known as Tranq or Tranq dope or the zombie drug. Xylazine has seen increasing usages across U.S. cities, most notably in San Francisco, New York, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles. So what is Xylazine? Well, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, Xylazine is a non-opioid large animal tranquilizer used in veterinary medicine. It's a horse tranquilizer, so it's not approved for human consumption. Xylazine itself is a central nervous system sedative that causes drowsiness, slow breathing, decreased heart rate, and decreased blood pressure. Xylazine can be snorted, injected, or smoked. And when used in combination with opioids like fentanyl, it can elongate the effects of the high. It gives it legs, as they like to say. Now, while its use in veterinary medicine is primarily in liquid form, the hydrochloride version, or the pill or the powder form, is virtually indistinguishable from heroin or fentanyl. But it's a heck of a lot cheaper. So increasingly, it has been used illicitly as an adulterant or a cutting agent in combination with other drugs, mostly fentanyl, but also with cocaine and heroin. The DEA says that the major source of Xylazine in the drug trade is from the Mexican drug cartels. It's a relatively cheap cutting agent that can be mixed in with more pure heroin or fentanyl, turning, say, 1 kilo into 2 kilos, thereby increasing profits. And so if you can step on your product like that and also elongate the effects of the high, well, that's a no-brainer for drug cartels. And get this, it is not currently a controlled substance under the U.S. Controlled Substances Act. The DEA states that it can easily be bought online with, quote, no association to the veterinary profession, nor requirements to prove any legitimate need. So how prevalent is it? Well, in Philadelphia, 90% of lab-tested dope samples off the street contained Xylazine. And the Kensington section of Philadelphia, which is a homeless addict community, has kind of become the epicenter of Tranq usage in the US. But the problem really has spread nationwide. In the last 2 years, the number of xylazine positive overdose deaths has increased by over 500% in the Midwest, 750% in the West, and a shocking 1,100% in the South, according to DEA figures. Now, some people confuse xylazine with ketamine, which is also an anesthetic first synthesized in 1962 by Kelvin Stevens. Now, ketamine is derived from phencyclidine, which you may know as PCP, or angel dust on the street. And PCP was originally designed to be used medicinally, ketamine being an evolution of PCP, resulting from efforts to create an anesthetic where they had fewer hallucinogenic effects. Now, the history is that following FDA approval in 1970, ketamine was first used on American soldiers as anesthesia during the Vietnam War. Today, it's primarily used medicinally as an antidepressant. And of course, it's also abused recreationally, often referred to as Special K, wherein users seek what is called the K-hole, a state of disassociation with both visual and auditory hallucinations. Now, the difference between ketamine and xylazine, or Tranq, is that we have extensive research on ketamine in humans. It's approved by the FDA for use in humans. Tranq is not. It's for horses. And that is significant because one of the major problems with Tranq is that use of the drug leads to rotting skin ulcerations and open wounds. Hence its horrifying name, the zombie drug. These wounds can be so severe that if left untreated, it can lead to limb amputation. Now, I'll spare you the most gruesome of these pics, but one user said, quote, "Tranq is basically zombifying my body. Until 9 months ago, I never had wounds. Now there are holes in my legs and feet. And these wounds don't respond to traditional wound care treatments. So medical providers don't have a great way of treating them because they don't have the clinical research regarding the mechanism of disease." Now, the other major problem is that when combined with opioids, which are also nervous system depressants, the risk of a deadly overdose is increased. And unlike a typical opioid overdose, xylazine does not respond to Narcan, which can usually be used to revive a user from an overdose of opioids. So there you have it. That is the newest drug craze in the United States, xylazine, Tranq. How will it all play out? Will it go away? Will it move on to something else? Well, we'll just have to stay tuned and find out. So that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button for me. If you got a comment, put it in the comment sections below. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so now. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.